Let's see. Imagine opening a home listing at breakfast and seeing a house that sold for $290,000 a few years ago, now asking more than $420,000. You close the tab, wait 3 months, come back expecting reality to have returned, and somehow the price is still there. Meanwhile, fewer homes are changing hands than at almost any point in decades. Buyers disappeared. Prices barely moved. That is the housing market Americans are trying to understand right now. The strange part is that this does not feel like a normal housing crash. There are no endless foreclosure signs lining every street. Instead, families keep renewing expensive leases, first-time buyers keep saving larger down payments, homeowners stay inside houses they have outgrown, and perfectly qualified people keep scrolling through Zillow, wondering how a normal salary stopped being enough to buy a normal home. The popular explanation is that home prices simply became too expensive, and eventually buyers will force sellers to lower them. That sounds logical. Usually when demand falls, prices follow. But this market has another force working in the opposite direction. The same mortgage rates that pushed millions of buyers out are also giving millions of existing homeowners a powerful financial reason not to sell. We'll have you wait calm like calm financial breakdowns where we follow the numbers instead of the headlines. Subscribe before we go deeper, because understanding this market requires looking at more than home prices. You have to understand what happened to interest rates, housing supply, homeowner behavior, and why all four are now pulling against each other. The core idea is simple. America does not just have an affordability problem. It has a mobility problem. Buyers cannot comfortably afford the homes available at current prices and rates, while many owners cannot financially justify giving up the extraordinarily cheap mortgages they already have. One group is trapped outside the market. The other is financially encouraged to remain inside it. That distinction matters because housing is supposed to move with people's lives. A couple has another child and needs another bedroom. Someone accepts a job 2 states away. Parents downsize after their kids leave. A marriage ends. Retirement begins. Normally, those life changes create listings, transactions, and opportunities for the next buyer. But when moving means replacing a mortgage near 3% with one around twice that level, ordinary life decisions suddenly come with extraordinary price tags. And that may be the best way to understand what just happened to housing. The market did not run out of people who want homes. It ran out of financially comfortable ways for people to trade places. Demand did not simply disappear, and supply did not simply disappear. Both sides stepped backward at the same time, leaving prices elevated and transactions painfully slow. Consider Daniel, 34, an operations manager earning $92,000 a year outside a growing Midwestern city. A strong credit, no credit card balance, about $48,000 saved, and he has spent 4 years preparing to buy. On paper, he looks exactly like the kind of buyer who should finally be ready. 5 years ago, he probably would have been. Daniel currently pays $1,850 in rent. To add groceries, his car payment, insurance, utilities, and student loans, and he still manages to save around $900 during a good month. He is not trying to buy a luxury property. He wants 3 bedrooms, a garage, and enough backyard space for his dog. The kind of house his parents would have considered completely ordinary. Then he finds one listed near $400,000. A reasonable down payment, the mortgage alone lands around $2,000 a month at a rate near 5% before property taxes, homeowners, insurance, maintenance, and everything that eventually breaks because houses apparently enjoy developing expensive problems on weekends. Daniel has a decision to make. Keep renting while hoping affordability improves, or stretch his budget now because he is terrified prices could move even farther away. Buying still feels reasonable to Daniel because every alternative carries its own risk. But his rent could rise again. Home prices could keep climbing. Mortgage rates might stay elevated for years. And after 4 years of saving, continuing to wait feels less like patience and more like watching the finish line move every time he gets close. So stretching the budget today can feel safer than gambling on a better market tomorrow. Daniel's looking at only one side of the transaction. Somewhere across town is another homeowner who might have sold him a house under normal circumstances. That homeowner bought in 2021, owes roughly $310,000, and locked in a mortgage near 3%. Selling today would mean giving up that loan and borrowing again at something closer to 6% or 7%. Suddenly, Daniel's affordability problem and the seller's moving problem are the same problem viewed from opposite sides of the front door. But most buyers first notice the price tag. A median existing home that was around the high $200,000 range before the pandemic moved above $400,000 within a few years. That increase alone would have strained household budgets. But home prices are only half of what changed. The financing underneath those prices changed just as dramatically. A $400,000 home with 20% down. The mortgage is $320,000. A pandemic-era rate near 2. 65% principal and interest would be around $1,500 a month. At roughly 6. 5%, that same loan moves above $2,000. Why? Nothing about the kitchen improved. The roof did not become younger. The school district did not suddenly become elite. The cost of borrowing the money simply became dramatically more expensive. Obviously, and buyers do not experience that difference as an abstract percentage. They experience it as hundreds of dollars disappearing from every future paycheck before property taxes, insurance, repairs, utilities, or an air conditioner decides to retire unexpectedly in July. That is why a rate moving from around 3% to above 6% is not a small adjustment. It can completely change who qualifies for a house. Suppose Daniel finances $360,000. At roughly 3%, his principal and interest would be about $1,500 per month. Around 6. 5%, $2,275. That is roughly $775 every month before any other housing expense appears. Over 1 year, that difference approaches $9,000. Over several years, it becomes money that could have funded retirement accounts, childcare, travel, emergencies, or simply breathing room. Now multiply that pressure across millions of households. The people who might have qualified comfortably several years ago suddenly need much higher incomes to purchase similar properties. Home sales fall because fewer buyers can make the monthly math work. Normally, sellers would respond by cutting prices. But many sellers are looking at their own mortgage statements and making the exact opposite decision. Do nothing. That is the first lesson of this housing market. High rates did not only destroy demand, but also damaged supply. They push potential buyers toward the sidelines while simultaneously convincing existing owners to stay exactly where they are. And once both groups stop moving, the question changes from why are homes so expensive to something much more important. What would actually force this market to start moving again? If you want a simple housing checklist for running the numbers before you buy, comment numbers below and check the pinned comment. I'll leave the free checklist there so you can compare the payment, total housing cost, and financial trade-offs without relying on someone else's sales pitch. To understand why supply remains so tight, go back to 2020 and 2021. Mortgage rates fell to levels Americans had essentially never seen before, reaching about 65% for a 30-year fixed mortgage at the low point. Millions of homeowners refinanced or purchased homes with rates below 4%, and many locked in payments that look almost impossible to recreate today. Those mortgages became incredibly valuable assets, even though most homeowners never think of them that way. That creates what economists call the mortgage lock-in effect. But the phrase sounds much less painful than the reality. If a homeowner has a $400,000 mortgage near 3%, moving to another similarly priced home with financing near 6, 5% could increase the monthly principal and interest by hundreds of dollars. So even when the family wants another bedroom, a shorter commute, or a different school district, staying put can be the financially rational choice. And there are a lot of homeowners in that position. Roughly half of outstanding mortgages still carry rates below 4%, with a meaningful share below 3%. Those are not simply cheap loans anymore. They are financial advantages, and natural, that disappear the moment the house is sold. The fear. A homeowner may have gained $150,000 in equity and still feel unable to move because replacing the mortgage attached to that equity would dramatically increase the next monthly payment. That is why waiting for desperate sellers to flood the market has been so frustrating. Many owners are not underwater. They are not facing the kind of widespread financial distress that forced homes onto the market during the last housing crisis. They have equity, fixed payments, and mortgages they can comfortably service. If the offer is not attractive enough, they can simply remain where they are. But the shortage goes deeper than homeowners refusing to list. America entered the pandemic after more than a decade of building too few homes. Following the 2008 financial crisis, construction fell sharply, builders became more cautious, and for years the country added housing more slowly than household formation and population growth demanded. The pandemic did not create that shortage. It exposed it at exactly the wrong moment. But what builders produced also matters. Traditional starter home became increasingly difficult to make profitable. Land got more expensive. Labor got more expensive. Materials got more expensive. All local permitting and zoning restrictions added time and cost. So builders often had stronger incentives to put larger, more expensive homes on limited parcels rather than create the modest entry-level houses first-time buyers desperately needed. Imagine a young couple with $45,000 saved. That they do not need quartz countertops, a 3-car garage, or a giant kitchen island designed for 12 people who apparently visit every Tuesday. They need a small, reasonably priced home. But when fewer of those homes exist, every first-time buyer ends up competing for the same narrow slice of inventory, keeping pressure on prices even while the broader market slows down. Fun. Then there is the cash buyer. An older homeowner who purchased decades ago may sell a property with hundreds of thousands of dollars in accumulated equity and buy the next home with little or no financing. Mortgage rates matter far less to that buyer. A 32-year-old household, depending on a loan at 5% is not merely competing with another family. Sometimes it is competing with someone who does not care what mortgage rates are at all. This helps explain one of the strangest generational shifts in housing. First-time buyers are entering the market much later than previous generations did. The median first-time buyer has moved into roughly age 40 territory, compared with the late 20s decades ago. That delay matters because buying a first home has historically been one of the ways middle-class households begin accumulating housing equity over long periods of time. Image is not limited to whether someone owns a house this year. Delaying homeownership can affect where people live when they start families, how much they invest, whether they relocate for work, and how they think about financial security. At the same time, forcing yourself into an unaffordable mortgage simply to avoid being left behind can create an entirely different problem. There is no automatic winning choice when the starting math is this distorted. Which brings us to the psychological part of this market. Because if the numbers are so uncomfortable, why are intelligent people still tempted to stretch far beyond what feels safe? Because buying a home is rarely treated as just a financial transaction in America. It is tied to adulthood, success, stability, family, identity, and the fear that if you do not buy now, the door might close forever. Scarcity changes how people think. When homes feel permanently out of reach, buyers stop asking whether a purchase fits their financial life and start asking whether this might be their last chance. That is survival mode wearing a real estate costume. A payment that would have looked reckless 5 years ago begins to feel acceptable simply because the alternative feels like being locked out forever. The loss aversion pushes from the other side. Existing homeowners know exactly what they would be giving up by selling. A mortgage rate that may never return. Even if moving would improve their lives, replacing a 3% loan with one above 6% feels like voluntarily accepting a financial loss every month. So they tolerate longer commutes, smaller homes, or neighborhoods they have outgrown because surrendering that mortgage feels worse. Then comes social comparison. Your coworker bought in 2021. Your younger cousin somehow closed on a house last month. Someone online is explaining how they own 3 properties before 35. But suddenly, renting stops feeling like a housing decision and starts feeling like evidence that you are falling behind. The FOMO is especially dangerous in real estate because the purchase is large enough to affect decades of your financial life. And the choices are exhausting. Buy now or wait. Put 10% down or 20%. Choose an older existing home or take a builder incentive on new construction. Pay points to lower the rate or keep the cash. Stretch for the better neighborhood or protect monthly cash flow. When every option has a major downside, doing nothing can feel like the only decision that cannot immediately hurt you. Doing nothing has a cost too. A buyer who waits indefinitely may keep paying rising rent and miss years of potential ownership. A homeowner who refuses to move may give up a better job, more space, or proximity to family. The point is not that waiting is wrong. The point is that waiting is still a financial decision, even when no paperwork gets signed. This is why the housing problem cannot be solved with a slogan like buy now or wait for the crash. People are responding to fear, uncertainty, status, and loss at the same time they are responding to interest rates and prices. The spreadsheet matters, but so does the part of your brain that hates missing out, hates losing something valuable, and hates making irreversible decisions under uncertainty. Think of the current housing market like a crowded highway, where both entrance ramps and exit ramps have partially closed. Buyers are trying to enter, but high prices and expensive financing narrow the lane. Owners might normally exit one home and move into another, but giving up a low mortgage rate makes that exit painfully expensive. Traffic does not need to disappear, for the highway to stop functioning well. It only takes enough bottlenecks in the wrong places. Diane, that is what happened here. There are still millions of people who want to buy, sell, relocate, downsize, and upgrade. But the financial toll required to make those moves has become high enough that many simply stay where they are. Well, Daniel is sitting on one entrance ramp. He has the income credit and savings to participate, but the monthly payment keeps blocking the merge. Across town, a family with 2 children is sitting on an exit ramp in a house they have outgrown. Matsu. They could list it, but replacing their old mortgage would increase the cost of their next home so much that staying feels safer. And over time, that gridlock creates its own strange stability. It changes you before you notice. Fewer transactions do not automatically produce cheaper homes because fewer listings are appearing at the same time. Buyers keep waiting for sellers to blink. Sellers keep waiting for rates to fall. And the market remains stuck between them. Not crashing, not recovering, just charging everyone a higher price for the privilege of standing still. That is the defining image of this housing market. Not a building collapsing, but a traffic jam where almost everyone has somewhere they would rather go and almost nobody likes the price of moving. The market can stay expensive longer than buyers expect because dysfunction does not always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like millions of rational people refusing to move. Before you make your next housing decision, comment numbers below and check the pinned comment. I'll leave the free checklist there so you can run the real affordability math instead of judging a home by the listing price alone. Start by auditing your own housing numbers, not national headlines. The last 3 months of bank statements. Pull your last 3 months realistically spend after retirement contributions, debt payments, childcare, transportation, insurance, groceries, and normal life. Then estimate the full housing cost. Mortgage principal and interest, property taxes, homeowners insurance, maintenance, HOA fees if applicable, and the cash you will still need after closing. Next, identify the 2 or 3 variables that actually control your decision. For Daniel, those might be the mortgage rate, purchase price, and how long he expects to stay. A $20,000 cheaper house might matter less than a significantly better financing offer. The low advertised rate might matter less if the builder quietly inflated the base price. Do not compare houses. Compare complete financial packages. Then change the system so emotion has less room to hijack the decision. Set a maximum monthly housing number before touring homes. Keep your emergency fund separate from the down payment. Multiple loan estimates instead of accepting the first mortgage quote. If you decide to wait, automate the difference between your current housing cost and your future target payment into savings or diversified long-term investments rather than letting that money disappear into lifestyle spending. And use one decision rule going forward. Never ask only, can I qualify for this house? Ask, what happens to the rest of my financial life if I buy it? If the payment leaves enough room for retirement, emergencies, normal spending, and future choices, the house may work. If owning it requires everything else in your life to go perfectly for years, approval from a lender does not make it affordable. Because the deepest problem with today's housing market is not simply that houses cost more. It is expensive housing can quietly reduce your freedom. Interest with an E. The wrong mortgage can decide which job you can leave, whether one parent can stay home, how much you can invest, how you handle an emergency, and whether an unexpected repair feels annoying or terrifying. A home should give your life stability, not require your life to become financially rigid just to keep it. So when you hear that the market is about to crash, recover, unlock, or become affordable again, remember the core idea. This market is frozen because buyers and sellers are trapped by different sides of the same math. The better question is not, what will housing do next? It is, what price, payment, and timeline would make buying genuinely work for me even if the market refuses to cooperate? Before you leave, comment numbers and check the pinned comment. Location fission. The free housing checklist is there if you want a simple framework for comparing the real cost of buying, waiting, or continuing to rent, along with the private community details for deeper financial breakdowns. The housing market may stay irrational longer than anyone wants, but your financial life does not have to become irrational with it. The goal is not to win a bidding war, perfectly time interest rates, or prove that you became a homeowner on schedule. The goal is to make sure the place you call home never costs you more freedom than it gives you.